Hello, Thaddeus. It's Friday. Or it's Saturday. Actually, it's Thursday, but I'm not sure when I'm going to finish editing all of this together and then actually get it uploaded. Oh god, what if it's Sunday? That'd be a really long time. I see that you have a house guest there. And here's the thing about that, he was supposed to be picking up my dry cleaning. Also, what the heck was going on with my hair up there? Okay, so last video I pretty much mentioned that I don't like candy corn because I think it's nasty. But here's the thing about that. I do like these pumpkin things. The same sort of waxy, sugary thing that has the same consistency as candy corn I somehow like because it's in the shape of a pumpkin and orange. Neither of those things are actually food products that should be consumed by a human being. They're closer to a candle than they are food. So while we are called guys from the future, I thought we might actually talk about some elements of the future, specifically our idea of pre-futurism. Particularly because I read a couple of articles this week that tie into pre-futurism, well, in terms of theory and what we kind of conceived of pre-futurism being, which we never really actually sat down and conceived of what pre-futurism was. But, bear with me, I have some ideas. So this is partly where I think Darwin comes in very handy in terms of this discussion, is that up until, say, about that time period, people kind of thought in a sort of static universe. Things didn't change. But once you have evolution come on the scene, people really get the idea that there is this change over time. Society can change. We start to get the natural sciences, history comes into play, and we start to develop this idea of what the world used to be to what the world is today. And we get the idea that society can change. We have a future, a past, and a present. I mean, just look at what's going on since just look at what's happened in our lifetime. We went from not even having personal computers in the home and landlines to internet everywhere at every conceivable place, including McDonald's, so that you could take your laptop or iPhone with you. And good luck finding someone with a landline. So we live in this era where we're cognizant of the future, that there's a future that's going to happen, and that people right now are going to make choices that are going to affect that future. So what it boils down to is that we today have a responsibility to ensure that that future is as good as we want it to be. So I exercise and work out, not because it makes me extremely attractive to be in that kind of shape, but it means that I will get to enjoy as much of the future as possible. Also, it helps me sleep at night. But there are, in fact, some broader issues that come along with this idea of being aware of the future, particularly when we think about, say, global warming. We have a future where if we don't do anything, most of the planet is going to start to be underwater, life as we know it is going to have to drastically alter. So I think this awareness of the future is the important concept that underlines pre-futurism. Science fiction is a medium where you see a lot of ideas of this is a possible future, or that's a possible future, or this is somehow how the future is going to end up. So in science fiction, you already had a lot of pre-futurism of people looking forward to the future. So pre-futurism as more of a modern idea is not just limited to, say, science fiction. It's in all sorts of realities. It's in all sorts of art. This idea that there is a future out there and that we have to be ready for it, that we have to care about it, that there will be this radically different future that is different from a society today. So I think there's about 3 different approaches to pre-futurism. The first is to pretty much embrace pre-futurism and try to make the future as awesome as possible. The second, and this is part of an essay I'm working on about politics, and part of this is that people who just don't seem to understand that there's a future, who don't want to operate like there's a future, and aren't willing to ask those sorts of questions about what a new and radical future will look like, and therefore we're not going to be prepared for it. What separates the second group of people from this third group of people, the second group of people isn't treating the present maliciously. The third group of people, however, the kind of people who drive cars like this, are just a bunch of narcissistic solipsists who think that everything today is about them and the future be damned. Living in southwest Missouri, you see a lot of people with very large trucks that are immaculately clean and they do nothing but drive on city streets, so they have no reason to own a truck that big. Now, you might know this about me. Those people piss me off. Not as much as people that drive Hummers, but I don't see people who drive Hummers every day. I do give anybody I see driving a Hummer the finger, though. Unless they're in the military and there's a 50 cal on it, but then that's a different situation. Let's consider this third group of people awful human beings. Now, the articles I was talking about, the first one's from Paulo Freire, and you've actually read this one before. It's the second chapter of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, but I decided I wanted to teach that to my students, and they actually had a very good reaction to it. In the article, he eventually ends with the idea of problem-posing education as being about the future. But the article that I really wanted to touch on, link in the information down here, is an interview with Frederick Jameson. And he's talking about his new book that came out, well, a while ago, but it's an old article, so bear with me. It's his book about the reading of Das Kapital, Volume 1. And what the article kind of points to here is that Marxism has a lot of implications for pre-futurism. In general, Marxism is concerned with the passage of history and change of history, and essentially socialism is what comes after capitalism, so you have this sort of transition. Based off your idea of post-scarcity, economics, and the lack of jobs, that's actually part of the central contradiction of capitalism, is that the people who are producing the material goods want to decrease what they're paying for, increase automation, and decrease payroll. Jameson quotes a guy in the interview talking about how much this guy did not like the term job creators, and let me just read this to you. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to increase my payroll because I think it's good for the American economy. So essentially what you end up having is a bunch of consumer goods that nobody can afford to buy. This isn't really the gist of what Pre-Futurism is about. Well, it's partly avoiding that situation by forethought and prior planning. So while Pre-Futurism itself is not entirely beholden to Marxism, there is a lot of interplay there. So that's just some thoughts on Pre-Futurism and the direction it could take. I think it needs to be more fleshed out, and I think it's more about how society represents itself and this knowledge of the future and how it deals with representing its knowledge of the future, and it's not so much yay socialism, and I don't think it should be. But before I call it a wrap on this video, I have one more thing that I want to do. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Say goodbye, Sylvia. I will see you in the future.